The fluorescent lights of Blackwood Tower hummed their monotonous song as I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office on the 40th floor, watching the city sprawl beneath me like a kingdom I'd conquered with blood and calculated ruthlessness. Connor Blackwood. That's who I was to this world. A name whispered in fear across boardrooms and back alleys alike. A man who'd built an empire on the foundation of violence, cunning, and an iron will that never bent, never broke. But tonight, as the clock struck past midnight and my security team made their rounds through the building I used as a legitimate business front, I felt that familiar hollowness in my chest. The same emptiness that had consumed me for 7 years, 2 months, and 14 days. Not that I was counting, except I was. Every single God-forsaken day since they took her from me. Chloe, my little girl, my everything. I turned from the window, loosening the tie around my neck as I prepared to head down to the parking garage. My meetings had run late. Discussions about territorial disputes that required my personal attention, investments that needed laundering through the proper channels, people who needed to be reminded why crossing the Blackwood family was a death sentence. The usual business of running a criminal empire disguised as a real estate conglomerate. The building should have been empty except for my men and the night cleaning crew. I paid little attention to the latter, invisible people doing invisible work, exactly how I preferred my civilian employees. They knew nothing, saw nothing, said nothing. That's how they stayed alive in my world. But as I walked toward the elevator, I heard it. Soft, melodic, barely audible over the hum of the ventilation system. Someone was humming. No, not just humming, singing, a lullaby. My feet stopped moving. My heart, that organ I'd thought had calcified into stone 7 years ago, suddenly thundered against my ribs with the force of a freight train. I knew that song. My dead wife, Isabella, had composed it herself when she was pregnant with Chloe. She'd never written it down, never recorded it, never shared it with anyone outside our family. It was ours alone, a secret melody she'd woven from love and hope and dreams of the future we thought we'd have. She'd sung it to Chloe every night until the cancer took her when our daughter was only 3 years old. After Isabella died, I'd continued the tradition, sitting by Chloe's bed and singing that same lullaby, my voice rough and uncertain but filled with all the love a father could give. It became our connection, our ritual, our promise that even though her mother was gone, I would always be there to protect her. Until I wasn't. Until the night 7 years ago, when rivals kidnapped her from our estate while I was handling business across town. By the time I returned to find the bodies of her guards and the ransom note, it was already too late. Despite paying everything they demanded, despite mobilizing every resource in my considerable arsenal, despite torturing information from every source I could find, Chloe never came home. They sent me a package 3 months after the kidnapping, her favorite stuffed rabbit, covered in blood. No body, no closure, just the crushing weight of failure and the knowledge that my world of violence had destroyed the only innocent, beautiful thing I'd ever created. I'd become more ruthless after that, more efficient, more brutal. If the world wanted a monster, I'd give them one worthy of their nightmares. I expanded my empire, crushed my enemies, built walls so high that nothing could ever hurt me again, because there was nothing left inside me to hurt. But now, standing in that empty corridor at midnight, I heard Isabella's lullaby floating through the air like a ghost from a life I'd lost. My hand moved to the gun concealed beneath my jacket as I moved silently toward the sound. Years of operating in the shadows had taught me how to move without making a sound, how to become invisible even in plain sight. I rounded the corner to find the source. A woman in a cleaning uniform was mopping the floor of the executive conference room, her back to me. She was small, probably mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. As she worked, she continued humming that impossibly familiar melody, occasionally adding soft lyrics that I recognized with a jolt. Isabella's words, sung in a voice that definitely wasn't my wife's. Who the hell are you? The words came out harder than I'd intended, sharp as broken glass. The woman jumped, spinning around with her hand pressed to her chest. Her eyes were wide with surprise and, I noted, a flash of fear that quickly transformed into careful neutrality. She knew who I was. Everyone in this building knew who I was, even if they didn't know what I was. Mr. Blackwood, sir, I'm sorry. I didn't realize anyone was still here. I'm Claire, from the cleaning service. I'll be quieter. That song. I cut her off, stepping closer. She instinctively took a step back, and I forced myself to stop, to moderate my tone. I needed information, and terrifying her wouldn't get me what I wanted. Where did you learn it? Confusion flickered across her face. She was pretty in an understated way. No makeup, no jewelry, nothing to draw attention. The kind of person who'd perfected the art of being overlooked. Song? Oh, you mean what I was humming? I'm not really sure. It's just something I've been singing for a while now. Why? Who taught it to you? I pressed, unable to keep the edge from my voice. She shook her head, genuine bewilderment in her expression. No one taught it to me. I think maybe I heard it somewhere years ago. It just sort of lives in my head. Is something wrong? Everything was wrong. Everything was impossible. That song had never been shared, never been recorded, never been sung by anyone outside my immediate family. The odds of someone randomly hearing it and remembering it years later were infinitesimal. Unless... Do you have children? The question came out before I could stop it. Now her expression shifted, a flash of protectiveness, maternal and fierce despite her attempt to maintain professional neutrality. I don't see how that's relevant to my work, Mr. Blackwood. So she did. And she was protecting that information, which told me everything I needed to know about the kind of person she was. The kind who'd shield her child from any potential threat, even if that threat came in the form of her employer's casual curiosity. I'm not asking to hurt anyone, I said, forcing my voice into something approximating gentleness. It was difficult. I hadn't used that tone in years. I'm asking because that song, it's personal to me, very personal, and I need to understand how you came to know it. She studied me for a long moment, her brown eyes searching my face for something. Trust, maybe. Or at least evidence that I wasn't going to make her life more difficult than it already clearly was. Her uniform was worn but clean, her hands rough from hard work, her shoes cheap and practical. This was a woman who struggled, who worked night shifts cleaning office buildings to make ends meet. I have a daughter, she finally admitted, her voice soft. She's 10. I've been singing her that song since she came into my life. But I honestly don't remember where I first heard it. Maybe on the radio or in a store. It's been years. 10 years old, the same age Chloe would be now. My mind raced through possibilities, each more unlikely than the last. Coincidence? Had to be. The world was full of children, full of songs, full of impossible overlaps that meant nothing. And yet, every instinct I'd honed over decades of operating in a world where details meant the difference between life and death was screaming at me that this mattered. This meant something. What's your daughter's name? I asked. Again, that protective flash. Why? Humor me. She hesitated, then seemed to decide that answering would get me to leave faster than refusing. Emma. Her name is Emma. Not Chloe. Of course not. What had I been expecting? That my daughter would somehow have ended up with this cleaning woman. That the universe would be kind enough to return what it had taken from me 7 years ago? That was fantasy, not reality. My reality was blood and loss, and the hollow space where my heart used to be. Where did you find her? I heard myself ask, unable to let it go. Find her? I didn't find her. She's my daughter. But you said she came into your life. Those were your exact words. Since she came into my life. And people don't usually phrase it that way about their biological children. I watched the color drain from her face as she realized what she'd revealed. Her hand tightened on the mop handle, knuckles going white. I think I should get back to work, Mr. Blackwood, and you should probably head home. It's late. She was deflecting, trying to end the conversation before she revealed more. But I was Connor Blackwood. I'd built an empire on reading people, on extracting information from those who didn't want to give it. And right now, every fiber of my being was telling me that this woman knew something, whether she realized it or not. I'm not trying to cause problems for you, I said, and I meant it. But that song, it belonged to my wife. She wrote it for our daughter before she died. No one outside our family should know it. Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed by something that looked like sympathy. I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Blackwood. Both losses. But I promise you, I don't know how I learned that song. And Emma. She's been through enough. Whatever you're looking for, whatever closure you need, we can't help you. She gathered her cleaning supplies, preparing to move to another room. But I couldn't let her walk away. Not yet. Not when she represented the first thread of possibility I'd felt in 7 years. One more question, I said, my voice low. Does Emma have any scars? Any distinctive markings? The woman, Claire, stopped, her back stiffening. When she turned to look at me, there was fear in her eyes. Real fear, the kind that comes from protecting something precious from a predator. Stay away from us, she whispered. Please, we haven't done anything wrong. Then she was gone, pushing her cart quickly down the hallway toward the service elevator, leaving me standing alone in that empty conference room with more questions than answers, and a dangerous, desperate hope beginning to unfurl in my chest. I pulled out my phone and called my head of security. Marcus, get me everything on a cleaning woman named Claire. Works the night shift in this building. I want to know where she lives, where she came from, who she associates with. And I need to know about her daughter, a 10-year-old girl named Emma. Boss, what's this about? Just do it. And Marcus, be discreet. I don't want them spooked. As I ended the call and finally made my way to the parking garage, I couldn't shake the sound of that lullaby from my mind. Isabella's voice seemed to echo in the empty spaces of my memory, singing to our baby girl. Our Chloe, with her bright green eyes and her infectious laugh and that distinctive birthmark on her inner wrist. A small, crescent-shaped mark that we used to joke looked like a tiny moon. 7 years of searching. 7 years of dead ends and false hope, and gradually accepting that my daughter was gone forever, taken from this world by the violence that had always surrounded my life. 7 years of turning myself into something darker, harder, more efficient at destroying anything that threatened what little I had left. And now, a cleaning woman humming a song that shouldn't exist outside my memories, speaking of a daughter who came into her life, with a protectiveness that spoke of secrets worth keeping. It was probably nothing. Almost certainly nothing. The universe wasn't in the habit of granting miracles to men like me, men with blood on their hands and bodies buried in their past. But as I drove through the empty streets toward my penthouse, I couldn't suppress the treacherous hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different, that maybe the universe had decided I'd paid enough for my sins, that the slate could be wiped clean, that the impossible could become possible, that maybe, somehow, I'd found the thread that would lead me back to my daughter. The next 3 days were an exercise in controlled obsession. I'd built my empire on patience, on the ability to wait for the perfect moment to strike. But now I found myself checking my phone every few minutes for updates from Marcus. I conducted my business as usual, meetings with my legitimate enterprises, carefully orchestrated moves against rival organizations, the endless maintenance of power that defined my existence. But underneath it all, My mind kept returning to Claire and the impossible melody she'd been singing. Marcus finally called on the third day, his voice carrying that careful neutrality he used when he knew I wasn't going to like what he'd found. "Boss, we've got everything on Claire Martinez, 34 years old, been working for Elite Cleaning Services for 6 years. Before that, she was a waitress at various diners around the city. Originally from Seattle, moved here 7 years ago." 7 years ago, the same time Chloe disappeared. "Go on," I said, keeping my voice level even as my pulse quickened. "She lives in the Riverside district, one of the cheaper apartment complexes. Keeps to herself, mostly. Her daughter Emma attends Riverside Elementary School. The girl's got some kind of speech issue. Doesn't talk at school, though her teachers say she seems to understand everything fine. Selective mutism, they call it." My hand tightened on the phone. Chloe had been chatty, always singing or laughing or asking endless questions about everything. But 7 years of trauma could change anyone, especially a child. Especially a child who'd been taken by monsters. "Anything unusual about the girl's history?" I asked. "That's where it gets interesting, boss. No birth certificate for Emma Martinez on file. No hospital records. Claire registered her for school about 5 years ago using what looks like a delayed birth certificate. The kind you can get if a child was born at home without proper documentation. But the timeline's weird. Claire moved here 7 years ago, supposedly alone. Then suddenly she's got a 5-year-old daughter 2 years later. No pregnancy, no adoption papers, nothing. My heart was hammering now. What about physical description? 10 years old, as we knew. Brown hair, green eyes. Green eyes? My voice came out sharper than I'd intended. Yeah, distinctive green, apparently. One of our people observed her at the school. "Boss, I've got photos if you want them. Had someone discreetly take shots when Claire picked her up yesterday. Send them. Now." My phone buzzed a moment later with an encrypted file. My hands were shaking, actually shaking as I opened it. When had I last experienced physical nervousness? I'd faced down rival bosses, corrupt politicians, federal investigations, all without breaking a sweat. But opening a photograph of a random 10-year-old girl had my pulse racing like I was facing execution. The image loaded, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. The girl in the photo was small for 10, thin but healthy looking, with long brown hair pulled into a ponytail. She was holding Claire's hand as they walked from the school building, her face turned slightly away from the camera. But what I could see of her profile, the shape of her features, the way she held herself, there was something achingly familiar about it. "Marcus, can you enhance this? I need to see her face clearly." "Already done, boss. Sending the enhanced versions now." The next image showed her face more directly, caught as she'd looked up at something in the sky. A bird, maybe, or a plane. And those eyes. Christ, those eyes. They were the same shade of emerald green that I saw in the mirror every day, the distinctive Blackwood eyes that had been in my family for generations. The same eyes that had looked up at me from Chloe's baby face, full of trust and love and innocence. But that could be coincidence. Lots of people had green eyes. I needed more. "Marcus, I need you to arrange something for me. I want to see this girl in person, but I can't risk approaching them directly. Can you?" "Way ahead of you, boss. I figured you'd want that. Elite Cleaning Services is one of our contracted companies. We control about 40% of their business. I can arrange for Claire to work different locations if you want, but I'm guessing you'd rather observe them in their natural environment." This was why Marcus had lasted 15 years as my head of security. He anticipated my needs before I voiced them, understood the delicate nature of sensitive operations, and never asked questions that didn't need answering. "The apartment complex where they live, can we get eyes inside without being obvious?" "There's a vacant unit across the hall from theirs. We can set up observation. But boss, I have to ask, what are we looking for here?" Because if this is about that song you mentioned, I need to know what we're dealing with. Is this woman a threat? Is she connected to the people who took your daughter? The question stopped me cold. Was that what I thought? That Claire had somehow been involved in Chloe's kidnapping? That she'd taken my daughter and raised her as her own? But that didn't make sense. The people who'd taken Chloe had been after money and power, rival families looking to hurt me where it would devastate most. They'd had no reason to keep her alive after they got what they wanted. I don't know what we're dealing with, I admitted. But I need to find out. And Marcus? This stays between us. No one else in the organization needs to know what we're investigating. Understood. I'll have the surveillance set up by tonight. After I hung up, I sat in my office staring at the enhanced photos of the girl named Emma. 7 years ago, my 3-year-old daughter had been taken from me. She'd been small for her age, with bright green eyes and long brown hair that Isabella had loved to braid. She'd had that distinctive crescent-shaped birthmark on her inner wrist. She'd been obsessed with butterflies and had a slight gap between her 2 front teeth that the dentist said would close as she grew older. This girl could be anyone. The timing lined up. The physical characteristics matched what Chloe might look like now. But that wasn't proof. I'd learned over the years that hope was a dangerous thing, a weakness that could be exploited. I'd let hope die after the first year of searching came up empty. I'd buried it alongside my capacity for trust, for love, for anything soft that could be used against me. But looking at those green eyes in the photograph, I felt Hope's undead fingers clawing their way out of the grave I'd dug for it. That night, I found myself in an unmarked van parked across from the Riverside apartments, watching the building through surveillance equipment that would make the FBI jealous. Marcus was with me, along with 2 of my most trusted operatives, people who'd been with me since before Chloe was taken, who understood what this might mean. They should be home in about 20 minutes, Marcus said, checking his watch. Claire's shift ends at 7, and she always picks the girl up from the after-school program on her way home. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Part of me felt ridiculous for this. Connor Blackwood, feared criminal kingpin, hiding in a van to spy on a cleaning woman and her daughter like some obsessed stalker. But the larger part of me, the part that had been a father before I'd been a monster, couldn't walk away from this. Not until I knew for certain. At 7:23, a beat-up Honda Civic pulled into the apartment complex's parking lot. Claire got out first, then moved to open the back door. The girl, Emma, climbed out, a backpack almost as big as she was hanging from her shoulders. Even from this distance, even through the surveillance equipment, I could see the way Claire's hand immediately found the girl's, the protective way she positioned herself between Emma and the rest of the world. They walked together toward the building entrance, and I found myself leaning forward, desperate for a clearer look. "Zoom in," I ordered, on the girl's wrist, left wrist. The operator manipulated the camera, bringing Emma's arm into sharp focus. She was wearing a long-sleeved shirt despite the warm weather, but as she shifted her backpack, the sleeve rode up slightly. There, right there on her inner wrist, a crescent-shaped mark. Exactly where Chloe's had been. "Boss," Marcus's voice was careful. "That's not conclusive. Lots of kids have birthmarks." He was right. He was absolutely right. And yet, every instinct I possessed was screaming that this was her. This was my daughter. My Chloe, alive after 7 years, living under a different name with a woman who'd somehow found her and kept her safe. "I need to get closer," I said. "I need to talk to them." "That's not a good idea," Marcus argued. "If you're wrong, you'll terrify an innocent woman and her daughter. If you're right, and that is Chloe, then we need to figure out how she ended up with Claire before we make any moves. There's too much we don't know." Rational, logical, exactly the kind of advice that had kept me alive and free for decades. But I wasn't feeling rational. I was feeling like a man who just glimpsed paradise after 7 years in hell. "Find out everything about the day Claire found Emma," I ordered. She said the girl came into her life. That means she found her somewhere, or someone gave her to Claire. I need to know when, where, and how. I'm on it, but boss, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this isn't her, that it's just a coincidence. I watched Claire and Emma disappear into the apartment building, my eyes tracking them until they were out of sight. Then we'll know for certain, but I'm not walking away until I do. Over the next week, I became intimately familiar with Claire and Emma's routine. They woke at 6:30 every morning. Claire made breakfast while Emma got ready for school. They walked to the bus stop together, and Claire always waited until the bus was out of sight before heading back inside to sleep for a few hours before her own day started. Emma attended Riverside Elementary, where she was described by her teachers as bright, but withdrawn. She didn't speak, not a word, but she completed all her assignments diligently and seemed to have a particular affinity for art. Her drawings were often of butterflies, just like Chloe. Claire worked multiple jobs, the night cleaning shift at my building, daytime housekeeping for a few regular clients, and occasional weekend work at a local diner. She was running herself ragged to keep them housed and fed, but she never let Emma see the strain. Around her daughter, she was always smiling, always patient, always there. Marcus's team eventually uncovered the story of how Claire had found Emma, pieced together from old police reports and interviews with people who'd known Claire 7 years ago. She'd been working at a diner in a rough part of town when she'd heard sounds coming from an abandoned warehouse nearby. Inside, she'd found a small girl, maybe 3 or 4 years old, injured and alone, with no memory of who she was or how she'd gotten there. Claire had taken the girl to the hospital, but with no identification and no missing persons report matching the description, the authorities had planned to put her in the foster system. That's when Claire, who'd been struggling with her own demons and her own past, had made the decision to keep her. She'd used her connections to create a delayed birth certificate, given the girl a name, Emma, and moved across the country to start fresh. She'd saved my daughter's life. While I'd been tearing apart my organization looking for leads, while I'd been torturing information out of anyone who might know anything, while I'd been descending into darkness and violence, this struggling single woman had been giving Chloe the childhood I couldn't. But I needed to be absolutely certain before I acted. A DNA test would confirm it, but getting a sample without alerting them would be tricky. Marcus managed it, though, obtaining a hair sample from Emma's brush during a moment when Claire had to run back to the car for something she'd forgotten, and Emma was briefly alone in their apartment. The wait for the results was excruciating. 3 days that felt like 3 years. I continued my usual business, but my mind was elsewhere, trapped in that space between hope and despair where nothing else could exist. When the results finally came, Marcus delivered them in person, which told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. "It's her," he said simply, handing me the envelope. 99.9% certainty. That girl is Chloe Blackwood. I sat down heavily in my chair, the report trembling in my hands. My daughter, my little girl. She was alive. After 7 years of believing she was dead, of living with the guilt and the grief and the hollowness, she was alive. "What do you want to do, boss?" Marcus asked quietly. That was the question, wasn't it? What did I do? I could take her back right now. I had the power, the resources, the legal claim. She was my daughter, stolen from me and now found. I could reclaim her, bring her back into my world, give her everything money could buy. But what kind of life would that be? My world was violence and danger, the same world that had resulted in her being taken in the first place. And Claire. Claire had saved her, raised her, loved her as her own for 7 years. Ripping Emma away from the only mother she remembered would destroy them both. "I need to think," I said. "But Marcus, increase security around them. I don't want anyone getting close without us knowing about it. If I found her, Others might too. The people who took her might still be looking. As Marcus left to make arrangements, I sat alone in my office, holding a photograph of Emma and Claire, taken at the park where they went every Sunday. In it, Emma was smiling. Not a huge smile, but a small, genuine expression of contentment as Claire pushed her on a swing. I'd spent 7 years becoming a monster to survive my daughter's loss. Now I had to figure out if there was enough of the man I used to be left to deserve her back. Making decisions had never been difficult for me. In my world, hesitation meant death. You evaluated the situation, calculated the risks, and acted with absolute certainty. But sitting in my penthouse at 3 a.m, staring at the DNA results that confirmed what my heart already knew, I found myself paralyzed by indecision for the first time in decades. Chloe was alive. That fact alone should have been enough to propel me into action. I could walk into that apartment complex with my legal team, prove my paternity, and have my daughter back within 24 hours. Claire Martinez would have no legal standing to keep her. The delayed birth certificate was fraudulent, the adoption unofficial, the entire situation built on a foundation of well-intentioned deception. But every time I reached for the phone to call my lawyers, I found myself remembering the way Emma had smiled in that photograph at the park, the way she'd held Claire's hand with complete trust, the way she'd seemed content despite living in poverty, despite attending an underfunded school, despite having none of the material advantages I could provide. Claire had given my daughter 7 years of safety. 7 years while I'd been consumed by vengeance and violence. 7 years when I'd transformed myself into exactly the kind of man a child should be protected from. "You're overthinking this, boss," Marcus said when he found me at dawn, still sitting in the same spot, the DNA results clutched in my hand. "She's your daughter. You have every right to take her back." "Do I?" I asked, my voice rough from lack of sleep. "What am I going to tell her?" "Hello, Emma, or should I say Chloe. I'm your father, the man whose lifestyle resulted in you being kidnapped and traumatized so severely that you still can't speak 7 years later. Come live in my world of violence and corruption." Marcus had the grace not to answer immediately. He poured himself a drink from my bar. It was early for that, but neither of us mentioned it, and sat across from me. We'd been through hell together, him and I. He'd been there the night Chloe was taken, had nearly died trying to protect her. The scars on his chest were a permanent reminder of that failure. "What if we approached it differently?" he finally suggested. "What if you talked to Claire first? Explained who you are, who Emma really is. Gave her a chance to process this before you made any legal moves. And if she runs, takes Emma and disappears, where would she go that you couldn't find them? Boss, I've watched that woman for weeks now. She's not a criminal. She's not a con artist looking for a payout. She's a scared single mother who found an abandoned child and did what she thought was right. Maybe she deserves to know the truth." I considered this. Claire had every reason to fear me once she knew who I was, what I was. But she also deserved to understand that the little girl she'd been raising as her own had a father who'd never stopped looking for her, who'd never stopped mourning her loss. "Set up a meeting," I decided. "Neutral location, just me and Claire. Make it clear I'm not there to threaten her, but that we need to talk." "When?" "Tonight. I've waited 7 years. I'm not waiting another day." The meeting was arranged at a small cafe on the edge of the city, the kind of place that catered to late-night workers and insomniacs. Claire arrived precisely on time, looking exhausted and frightened. She'd dressed carefully, her best jeans, a clean sweater, her hair down instead of pulled back in its usual ponytail. Armor, I recognized. She was preparing to fight for her daughter. I was already seated in a back booth when she arrived, positioned so I could see the entrances and exits. Old habits from a dangerous life. She spotted me immediately and squared her shoulders before walking over, and I found myself respecting her courage. She knew who I was now. Marcus had informed her that Connor Blackwood wanted to meet. and she'd come anyway. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice steadier than I'd expected as she slid into the booth across from me. "Your man said this was important, that it was about Emma." "It is. Thank you for coming. I know you must have questions." "Is this about the song?" she interrupted. "Because I told you. I don't know where I learned it. If it's copyrighted or something, I'll stop singing it." "I didn't mean to." "The song belonged to my wife," I said quietly. "Isabella Blackwood. She composed it for our daughter Chloe, who was kidnapped from our home 7 years ago when she was 3 years old." The color drained from Claire's face. She didn't speak, but I watched the pieces clicking together in her mind, watched her reliving every interaction she'd had with Emma, every detail about the girl she'd found in that warehouse. "The night my daughter was taken," I continued, keeping my voice low and measured. "Her kidnappers demanded ransom. I paid. But they never returned her. We received evidence that suggested she was dead, but we never found a body. I've spent 7 years searching for answers, for closure, for any trace of what happened to my little girl." "No," Claire whispered. "No, you're wrong. Emma's not. She can't be. 3 weeks ago, I heard you singing that lullaby, the one only my family knew. Then I learned about your daughter, 10 years old, the right age, green eyes like mine, a crescent-shaped birthmark on her left inner wrist, exactly like Chloe had." I slid the DNA results across the table. "I had a test done. I'm sorry for the invasion of privacy, but I had to know. Emma is Chloe. Your daughter is my daughter." Claire's hands were shaking as she picked up the papers, her eyes scanning the results. I watched tears begin to stream down her face, watched her whole world collapse in real time. And I felt like the monster everyone believed me to be, destroying this woman's life with scientific proof and cold, hard facts. "I found her in a warehouse," Claire said finally, her voice breaking. "She was hurt, scared, alone. There was blood, and she was crying, and she couldn't tell me who she was or how she got there. I took her to the hospital, but she had no ID. No one came looking for her. And I couldn't let them put her in the system. I couldn't let her disappear into foster care. So I kept her. I gave her a name, and a home, and a life. I know it was illegal. I know I should have tried harder to find her family, but Mr. Blackwood, she was so small and so scared, and I loved her. I love her. She's my daughter." "I know," I said, and I meant it. "I've been watching you for weeks. I've seen how you care for her, how you work yourself to exhaustion to give her a better life. You saved her when I couldn't. You gave her love and stability when my world was falling apart. I'm not here to accuse you of anything, Claire. I'm here because I don't know what to do." She looked up at me, surprise cutting through her grief. "What do you mean?" "I mean that 7 years ago I failed to protect my daughter. The life I led, the choices I made, the enemies I created, they resulted in her being taken. I can't undo that, and in the years since I've become harder, colder, more focused on revenge and power than on being the kind of man a child needs in her life." I paused, trying to find the words for feelings I'd suppressed for so long. "Emma doesn't remember me. She doesn't remember her mother, or her old life, or anything before you found her. To her, you're her mother. You're the one who's been there for every scraped knee and every nightmare. You're the one who taught her to read and held her when she cried and made her feel safe. Taking her from you would destroy her. And I can't do that to her again. I can't be the source of her trauma twice in one lifetime." Claire was staring at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Are you saying you're not going to take her from me?" "I'm saying I don't know what I'm going to do. I admitted. Every instinct I have is screaming at me to take my daughter back, to make up for 7 years of lost time. But those same instincts led to her being taken in the first place. My lifestyle, my business, my enemies, they're all still there. Bringing her back into my world would put her in danger again. Then don't, Claire said urgently, leaning forward. Mr. Blackwood, Connor, please, just leave us alone. We're happy. She's safe. She's healing. Don't destroy that because of biology. She's my daughter, I said, and for the first time, I heard the rawness in my own voice, the pain I'd been suppressing for 7 years. I held her when she was born. I sang her to sleep every night. I promised Isabella on her deathbed that I would always protect our child, and I failed. I failed so completely that my daughter ended up abandoned in a warehouse, traumatized so badly that she can't speak. Do you have any idea what that knowledge does to me? Do you understand what it means to know that your child suffered because of your choices? Claire's expression softened slightly. I do, actually. Every day I look at Emma and wonder if I did the right thing. If I should have tried harder to find her family. If keeping her was selfish. If she'd be better off with her biological parents instead of with me, struggling to make ends meet. I torture myself with those questions constantly. We sat in silence for a moment, two people bound together by love for the same child, neither knowing how to move forward. There's something else you need to know, I finally said. The people who took Chloe, they were never caught. I destroyed several rival organizations in my search for her, but I never found the specific individuals responsible. If they learn she's alive, if they discover where she is, they might try again. Emma, Chloe. She's not safe as long as my enemies know she exists. Then we'll run, Claire said immediately. We've done it before. I can change our names again, move somewhere far away. They'd find you. If I could find you, they can too. And running means Emma loses her school, her friends, any stability she's managed to build. It means you lose your jobs, your life here, everything you've worked for. I don't care about any of that. I care about keeping her safe. I believed her. Everything I'd observed over the past weeks confirmed that Claire would sacrifice anything for Emma's well-being. She wasn't motivated by money or recognition or any of the usual human vices. She simply loved a child that genetics said was mine, but circumstances said was hers. What if there was another option? I asked. What if I could ensure Emma's safety without taking her from you? What if we could work together instead of fighting over her? Claire looked skeptical. What did you have in mind? I have resources, money, security, connections. I can make sure Emma has the best education, the best medical care, the best of everything. But more importantly, I can make sure she's protected. I can eliminate the threats that might come for her. I can make it so that no one ever hurts her again. In exchange for what? Visitation rights? Joint custody? In exchange for nothing, I said. I'm not trying to make a deal here, Claire. I'm trying to figure out what's best for my daughter. And right now, what's best for her is stability with the mother she knows, protected by the father she doesn't remember. She studied me for a long moment, searching for the angle, the trap, the hidden agenda. She wouldn't find one because there wasn't one. For the first time in decades, I was acting purely on emotion instead of calculation, and it was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. I need time to think, she said finally. It's a lot to process. Finding out that Emma is actually Chloe, that she has a father who's been looking for her, that we might be in danger. I need to figure out what this means for her. Take all the time you need, I said, though it physically hurt to say the words. But Claire, don't run, please. Running will only draw attention. Stay where you are, maintain your routines. Let me put security in place around you. You won't see them, but they'll be there, keeping you safe while we figure this out. She nodded slowly, then stood to leave. But at the edge of the booth, she paused and looked back at me. That lullaby you mentioned, Isabella's song. Emma hums it sometimes when she's falling asleep. I always wondered why it comforted her so much when she didn't even know where it came from. I guess somewhere deep down, she remembers. She remembers her mother's voice singing to her. The words hit me like a physical blow. 7 years, and some part of my daughter still remembered the mother who'd loved her, still found comfort in a melody from a life she couldn't consciously recall. Thank you for keeping her safe, I managed to say. Thank you for loving her when I couldn't be there to do it myself. Claire's eyes filled with tears again, but she nodded and walked away, leaving me alone in the booth with cold coffee and the weight of impossible decisions. Marcus found me there an hour later, still sitting in the same spot. How did it go? I don't know, I admitted. I told her the truth, gave her the choice. Now we wait and see what she decides. And if she decides to disappear with Emma anyway, I'd already considered that possibility. Claire loved Emma enough to risk everything for her, including running from a man with the resources to find anyone anywhere. But I'd also seen something in her eyes tonight. Recognition of a fellow parent's pain, understanding that I wasn't the enemy she'd expected me to be. Then we find them and try again, I said. But I don't think she'll run. I think she knows that Emma's safest with both of us working together, even if neither of us knows exactly what that looks like yet. You're really going to let her keep raising your daughter? I'm really going to let my daughter keep the mother who saved her life, I corrected. There's a difference. As we left the cafe and headed back into the night, I felt the weight of 7 years beginning to shift. Not lifting. It would never fully lift, but redistributing itself into something I might eventually learn to carry. My daughter was alive. She was safe. She was loved. And for now, that would have to be enough. But even as I tried to convince myself of that, I knew the real challenges were still ahead. Because keeping Emma safe meant confronting the enemies who'd taken her in the first place. It meant making choices that would either save my daughter or destroy any chance of having a relationship with her. It meant deciding, once and for all, whether Connor Blackwood, the criminal kingpin, could transform into someone worthy of Chloe Blackwood's father. The next move would be Claire's, and whatever she decided, I would have to live with the consequences. Claire called 3 days later. I was in a meeting with the heads of my distribution network, discussing territorial disputes and profit margins, when my private phone buzzed. Only 5 people had that number, and when I saw Claire Martinez on the screen, I immediately stood and walked out of the conference room without explanation. Claire, I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the anxiety that had been building since our meeting. We need to talk again, she said. Can you come to Riverside Park? Noon tomorrow. There's a playground near the south entrance. Emma will be at school so we can speak freely. I'll be there. The line went dead. Short, efficient, giving me no hint of what she'd decided. The next 18 hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. I went through the motions of my daily operations, but my mind was elsewhere, running through scenarios and outcomes, trying to prepare for whatever Claire might say. Marcus insisted on positioning security around the park before I arrived, but I made him keep them distant. This meeting was about trust, and showing up with an obvious armed escort would undermine that before we even began. I arrived 15 minutes early, and found Claire already there, sitting on a bench near the playground. She looked tired, more tired than usual, and I wondered if she'd slept at all since our last conversation. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "Thank you for calling. I wasn't sure you would." She was quiet for a moment, watching a group of children play on the swings. I almost didn't. Part of me wanted to take Emma and run. I have some money saved, enough to disappear for a while. But then I realized you were right. If you could find us, others could too. And running would mean ripping Emma away from the only stable life she's ever known. I'm glad you stayed, I said carefully. I did some research on you, she continued. Connor Blackwood, real estate developer, that's your public face. But I know people, have connections from my old life before Emma. I know what you really are, what you really do, and you know why I can protect her better than anyone else could. I also know why she was taken in the first place. Her voice carried no accusation, just statement of fact. Your enemies wanted to hurt you. They used an innocent child as a weapon. And you think bringing her back into that world will keep her safe? I don't want to bring her back into my world, I said firmly. I want to remove the threats from it so she can live safely in yours. Claire turned to look at me directly for the first time. How? By killing everyone who might want revenge against you? By starting a war that could spill over into our lives? Emma's already traumatized enough. She doesn't need to become collateral damage in your vendetta. It's not about vendetta, I argued. It's about ensuring that what happened 7 years ago can never happen again. And yes, that might mean eliminating certain threats. But I'd do it quietly, carefully, without any blowback that could touch you or Emma. You can't guarantee that. Violence breeds violence. You know that better than anyone. She was right, of course. I'd spent decades learning that lesson. But I also knew that sometimes violence was the only language certain people understood, the only way to ensure permanent safety. What do you want from me? I asked. Tell me what you need to feel secure about this situation. Claire pulled a worn envelope from her pocket and handed it to me. Inside were documents. Legal papers, I realized. Custody agreements, contracts, stipulations. I had a lawyer friend draw these up, she explained. I want legal recognition as Emma's adoptive mother. Full parental rights. With you listed as biological father, but with specific limitations on custody and visitation, until Emma is old enough to understand the situation and make her own choices. I scanned the documents. They were reasonable, actually. More than fair. She wasn't trying to cut me out completely, just protecting Emma's emotional well-being while acknowledging my rights as her father. I want Emma to know you, Claire continued. Eventually, when she's ready. But right now, she's a 10-year-old girl who doesn't speak and has nightmares about shadows and locked rooms. Dropping a father figure into her life, especially one with your complications, would be overwhelming. She needs stability first, healing. Then maybe we can talk about introducing you into her life. And in the meantime, you keep us safe. You provide financial support so I can work less and spend more time with Emma. You stay in the background, let me handle the parenting, and trust that I'm doing what's best for our daughter. Our daughter, she'd said, our daughter. Not my daughter, not her daughter, but ours. It was a small thing, but it felt monumental. I can agree to that, I said. All of it. But Claire, you need to understand that providing security means I'll need to know your schedules, your locations, your routines. My people will be watching always. It might feel invasive, but it's necessary. As long as Emma doesn't know they're there, she already has trust issues. Knowing she's being watched would make her anxiety worse. They'll be invisible, I promise. Claire nodded slowly, then pulled out another paper. There's one more thing. Emma's therapy. She's been seeing a counselor at school, but it's not enough. She needs specialized trauma therapy, someone who can help her work through whatever happened to her before I found her. That's expensive, and my insurance doesn't cover it. I'll handle it. Whatever she needs, whatever it costs. You just find the best therapist available, and I'll make sure she gets the treatment. For the first time since I'd met her, Claire smiled at me. It was small and tentative, but genuine. "You really love her, don't you? Even after all these years, even though she doesn't remember you." "She's my daughter," I said simply. "That doesn't change just because circumstances separated us. I loved her the day she was born, and I'll love her the day I die. Everything I'm doing, everything I've done, is for her. Even if she never knows it? Even then." We sat together for a while longer, working through details and logistics, establishing the framework for our unusual arrangement. By the time we parted, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 7 years. Hope tempered with realism. This wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be the reunion I'd fantasized about. But it was a path forward, a way to be part of my daughter's life, even if she didn't know who I really was to her. The next weeks fell into a routine. I had my lawyers formalize the arrangements Claire and I had agreed upon, ensuring she had legal protection and Emma had financial security. I hired the best child trauma specialist in the country and arranged for Emma to begin intensive therapy. I upgraded their apartment building's security without making it obvious, positioned surveillance teams that reported directly to Marcus, and began the delicate work of identifying and eliminating the specific threats that had led to Chloe's kidnapping 7 years ago. That last part was more difficult than I'd anticipated. The organization that had taken her had been dismantled years ago in my initial rampage of revenge. But I'd never found the specific individuals who'd carried out the kidnapping or given the orders. They'd gone underground, disappeared into the criminal underworld's shadows. Now, with renewed purpose, I began pulling those threads again. Marcus and I worked late into most nights, following leads that went cold years ago, applying pressure to information brokers, calling in favors from contacts across the country. Slowly, painfully, a picture began to emerge. The kidnapping had been ordered by Viktor Kozlov, a Russian mob lieutenant I'd crossed in a business deal gone bad. He'd wanted revenge and had chosen the cruelest method possible. But Viktor himself had been killed in a gang war 3 years ago. The men who'd actually carried out the kidnapping, a crew of 5, had scattered after delivering Chloe to whatever secondary location they'd been ordered to use. 3 of them are dead, Marcus reported one night, his laptop displaying surveillance photos and death certificates. Died within a year of the kidnapping. Natural causes, accidents, 1 OD'd. My guess is Viktor was cleaning up loose ends. And the other 2? That's where it gets interesting. Alexei Petrov and Ivan Sokolov both disappeared completely around the same time. No credit card use, no sightings, nothing. Like they vanished into smoke. They knew Viktor would kill them eventually, I reasoned. They took their payment and ran, changed their identities, went off-grid. Probably. But boss, here's the thing. About 6 months ago, Alexei Petrov resurfaced. He's living in Atlantic City under the name Alex Peters, working as a security consultant for various casinos. Keeps a low profile, but he's definitely the same guy. I leaned forward, every instinct suddenly alert. Does he know Chloe's alive? Can't be sure. But if he's been following your activities at all, and why wouldn't he be, given your history with Viktor, he might have noticed your recent behavior changes, the increased security around that apartment complex, the attention you've been paying to a cleaning woman and her daughter. The implications hit me like a freight train. If Alexei knew or even suspected that Chloe was alive, he represented a direct threat. He was one of the men who'd taken her, who knew what had happened during those missing weeks, who could potentially identify her if he saw her. We need to neutralize him, I said. Tonight. Marcus nodded. Already mobilizing a team. But boss, we should be smart about this. If we just make him disappear, it might alert even Sokolov wherever he is. We need to make it look natural. I don't care how it looks. I care that it's permanent. Then let me handle it. You stay here, maintain your normal schedule. That way you have an alibi if anyone asks questions later. He was right. Strategically, but every fiber of my being wanted to personally confront the man who'd kidnapped my daughter. Wanted to make him pay for 7 years of pain, for the trauma that still kept Emma silent, for the childhood Chloe had lost. "Make it painful," I said, my voice cold. "I want him to know why he's dying. Boss. I want him to know that Chloe Blackwood survived, that she's alive and safe and beyond his reach. I want that to be the last thing he hears before you end him." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. We both knew this was personal, not business. And sometimes, personal required sending a message even if no one else would hear it. The next morning, Marcus called to confirm it was done. Alexei Petrov had been found dead in his apartment, an apparent heart attack. No signs of struggle, no suspicious circumstances. A perfect, untraceable elimination. "Did you tell him?" I asked. "I did." He seemed confused at first, then terrified. Kept insisting she was supposed to have died in that warehouse, that Victor had ordered them to leave her there with no food or water. Said it wasn't personal, just business. Then I told him about Emma, about how she'd been found and saved. That was when he really started begging. I felt no sympathy, no remorse. This man had participated in my daughter's kidnapping, had left a 3-year-old child to die alone in an abandoned building. Whatever pain he'd experienced in his final moments was nothing compared to what Chloe had suffered. What about Ivan Sokolov? Still looking. But with Alexei dead, he'll probably go deeper underground. Might take years to find him. Then we take years. Emma's not safe until all of them are gone. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. Emma's physical safety could be assured through security and vigilance. Her emotional safety, her healing, her future, those required something different. Something I couldn't provide from the shadows. I began showing up at places I knew Claire and Emma would be, always at a distance, always careful not to be noticed. I watched Emma play at the park on weekends, saw her at the library where Claire took her every Thursday evening, observed her therapy appointments from my car across the street, hoping each session brought her closer to finding her voice again. And slowly, without ever speaking to her, without her knowing who I was, I began to learn my daughter all over again. She loved art, spending hours drawing intricate pictures of butterflies and flowers and fantastical creatures. She was kind to other children, even though she didn't speak to them, sharing her toys without being asked. She held Claire's hand constantly, as if afraid that letting go would mean losing her mother. She was beautiful, brave, resilient. Everything Isabella would have wanted her to be. Everything I'd hoped she could become despite the trauma she'd endured. And I realized, watching her from afar, that maybe this was enough. Maybe being her silent guardian, ensuring her safety and supporting her healing from the background, was the role I was meant to play in her life. Maybe Connor Blackwood, the criminal kingpin, could never be Connor Blackwood, the father, but he could be the shield that protected her from the darkness of his world. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. 3 months into our arrangement, everything fell apart in the span of a single afternoon. I was in a meeting with my financial advisors when Marcus burst through the door, his face ashen. He didn't speak, just gestured for me to follow him. The knot of dread that formed in my stomach told me everything I needed to know before he said a word. In the secure room adjacent to my office, Marcus pulled up surveillance footage on the monitor. This was taken 45 minutes ago at Riverside Elementary School. The video showed the school's parking lot during afternoon dismissal. Students poured out of the building, meeting their parents and climbing onto buses. I spotted Emma immediately. She was easy to pick out with her distinctive posture and the way she stayed close to the teacher supervising the carpool lane. Claire's car was visible in the distance, waiting in line to pick her up. Then a black SUV pulled up, stopping directly in front of Emma. The back door opened, and a man emerged. Even in the grainy footage, I recognized him from the photos Marcus had compiled during our investigation. Ivan Sokolov, the last surviving member of Chloe's kidnapping crew. "No," I breathed, my hand clenching into a fist on the desk. But the footage continued. Ivan approached Emma, saying something to her. She backed away, shaking her head. The teacher supervising noticed and moved toward them, but Ivan pulled out something. A gun, I realized, and the teacher froze. In the chaos that followed, as other parents screamed and pulled their children away, Ivan grabbed Emma and shoved her into the SUV. The vehicle peeled out of the parking lot and disappeared off camera. I was already moving before Marcus finished playing the footage. "Where's Claire?" "She saw it happen. She's being held by the police for questioning, but she's hysterical." "Boss, the FBI's been called in. This is a child abduction from a school. It's going to be all over the news within the hour." "I don't care about the news. I care about finding my daughter." I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. "Get every person we have on the streets. Check every traffic camera, every security feed, every possible route out of the city. And Marcus, find me Ivan Sokolov's location within the next 2 hours, or I'll burn this city to the ground looking for him." "Boss, the FBI..." "Can't move as fast as we can. Can't call in the favors we can. Can't do what needs to be done to get Emma back." I paused at the door, looking back at him. 7 years ago, I failed to protect my daughter because I followed the rules, because I waited for the authorities to do their jobs. I'm not making that mistake again. Find her. Now. The next 2 hours were a blur of mobilization. I called in every asset, every contact, every person who owed me a favor across the tri-state area. My legitimate business ground to a halt as I repurposed my entire organization toward one goal: finding Emma before Ivan Sokolov could disappear with her again. Claire called me from the police station, her voice raw from crying. "They're saying I kidnapped her. They're saying Emma's really Chloe Blackwood and I've been hiding her for 7 years. Connor, they think I'm working with the kidnapper. They won't let me leave. I'll handle it," I promised. "I'll send my lawyers and have you out within the hour. But Claire, I need you to think. Did Emma ever mention seeing anyone suspicious? Anyone who seemed too interested in her?" "No, nothing. She doesn't talk, remember? She can't tell me if someone's been watching her." She broke down into sobs. "This is my fault. I should have been more careful. I should have been watching for this. This isn't your fault. It's mine. It's always been mine. But I'm going to fix it. I'm going to bring her home." After I hung up, I had my legal team descend on the police station like an army. Within 30 minutes, they'd produced the custody agreements Claire and I had signed, proving that she was Emma's legal guardian with my full knowledge and consent. The police had no choice but to release her, though they made it clear she shouldn't leave the city. Marcus found me in my office at sunset, 3 hours after Emma's abduction. "I've got a lead. A warehouse in the industrial district. Same area where Claire found Emma 7 years ago." "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be without confirming in person. Traffic cams show the SUV heading in that direction. And boss? I had someone pull the property records. That warehouse has been owned by a shell company for the past 8 years. Guess who set up that shell company?" "Viktor Kozlov." "Exactly. Ivan's going back to the scene of the original crime. Either he's arrogant, or he's making a statement." I was already grabbing my weapon from the desk drawer. "How many men do we have available?" 20, ready to move on your command. But Connor, the FBI's going to figure this out too, eventually. If we go in guns blazing, we're all going to prison." "I don't care. Let me worry about the consequences later. Right now, I'm getting my daughter back." The warehouse district was a maze of abandoned buildings and rusted infrastructure, the kind of place where screams went unheard and bodies went undiscovered for months. Perfect location for anyone looking to conduct business away from prying eyes. I'd conducted plenty of my own operations in places like this over the years, which meant I knew exactly how dangerous they could be. My team surrounded the warehouse Marcus had identified while I approached from the front with him and 2 others. We moved in tactical formation, weapons ready, every sense heightened. Through a grimy window I caught sight of movement inside. 2 figures, one large and one small. Emma and Ivan Sokolov. We go on 3, I whispered. Priority is getting Emma out safely. If Ivan surrenders, we'll consider letting him live. If he doesn't. I didn't need to finish that sentence. We breached the door simultaneously, flooding the warehouse with armed men. Ivan spun toward us, his own gun drawn and pointed at Emma's head. She stood frozen beside him, her eyes wide with terror. And seeing that fear in my daughter's face ignited a rage in me that 7 years of searching had built into an inferno. Connor Blackwood, Ivan said, his English heavily accented. I thought you might come yourself. Very stupid. You should have sent police. Let her go, Ivan. Whatever Victor promised you, whatever money he left you, it's not worth dying for. Victor promised me nothing. Victor's dead, killed by Dmitry Volkov 3 years ago. But before he died, he told me about the Blackwood girl, how she was supposed to die in this very warehouse, how someone must have found her, saved her, because she was never found dead. He pressed the gun harder against Emma's temple, and I watched my daughter's whole body tremble. She was trying so hard to be brave, but she was just a child. My child. And she was terrified. I spent months looking for her, Ivan continued, following leads, watching you, waiting for a sign that she'd survived. Then I saw you, the great Connor Blackwood, watching a little girl at a park, a girl with green eyes and brown hair and the right age. I knew she was alive, and I knew that bringing her back here, finishing what Victor started, would make me a legend. It'll make you a corpse, I said coldly. You're surrounded. You can't escape. But if you let her go right now, I'll let you walk out of here. You have my word. Ivan laughed. Your word. You killed Alexei. Don't think I don't know. Now I'm going to kill your daughter, and you're going to watch. Just like Victor wanted. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. Ivan's finger tightened on the trigger. I raised my own weapon, knowing I couldn't fire without risking Emma. Marcus was moving to my left, looking for a clear shot. And Emma moved. She was small and scared, but she was also brave. Braver than any child should have to be. In the instant before Ivan could fire, she stomped down hard on his instep and threw herself sideways, out of the line of fire. The gunshot that followed was deafening in the enclosed space. But it wasn't Ivan's gun that had fired. It was mine. Ivan Sokolov dropped to the ground, a perfect shot through the center of his chest, dead before he hit the concrete. Around us, my team secured the warehouse, but I was already running to Emma, dropping my weapon and falling to my knees beside her. Are you hurt? Did he hurt you? I was checking her for injuries, my hands shaking with adrenaline and terror and relief all mixed together. She stared up at me with those distinctive green eyes. My eyes. And for the first time since I'd found her again, I saw recognition flicker across her face. Not memory exactly, but something. An awareness that this man kneeling before her, this scarred and violent stranger, was somehow important. You're safe now, I told her, my voice breaking. You're safe, and I'm never letting anyone hurt you again. I promise. Behind us, sirens wailed in the distance. The FBI had found us. Of course they had. Marcus's information about the shell company would have led them here eventually, and the sound of gunfire would have accelerated their response. Boss, we need to go, Marcus urged. Now, before they arrive. But I couldn't move. Couldn't take my eyes off my daughter, who was looking at me with a mixture of fear and curiosity, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Emma, I said softly, my name is Connor Blackwood. And I was a friend of your mother's. Your birth mother, I mean. Isabella. She would have wanted me to make sure you were safe. Emma's eyes widened. She opened her mouth, and for a heart-stopping moment, I thought she might speak. But no words came. Instead, she reached out and touched my face gently. her small hand resting against my cheek. It was the most beautiful moment of my entire life. "Boss, really? We have to go." Marcus was pulling at my arm now. Urgent. "Take her," I told him. "Get her back to Claire. I'll handle the FBI." "You'll go to prison." "Maybe, but she'll be safe. That's all that matters." I watched Marcus scoop Emma up and carry her toward the back exit, where our vehicles waited. She looked back at me over his shoulder, and I tried to commit every detail of her face to memory. This might be the last time I ever saw her. The FBI wouldn't be gentle about a criminal kingpin who'd conducted an armed assault that resulted in a dead body, regardless of the circumstances. But as federal agents flooded into the warehouse, weapons drawn and shouting commands, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 7 years. Peace. Emma was safe. That's what I'd promised Isabella. That's what I'd failed to do 7 years ago. But now, finally, I'd kept my word. The agents forced me to my knees, cuffed my hands behind my back, read me my rights. Through it all, I remained silent, offering no explanation or defense. What could I say that would matter? I'd killed a man. The fact that he'd been holding my kidnapped daughter at gunpoint would be investigated and adjudicated through proper channels. But right now, I was just another criminal who'd taken a life. They loaded me into a federal vehicle and drove away from the warehouse, and I watched the building disappear in the side mirror. Somewhere in this city, Emma was being reunited with Claire. They would hold each other and cry and begin the long process of healing from this new trauma. And I would face whatever consequences came from tonight's choices. But I had no regrets. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Because for the first time in 7 years, my daughter was truly safe. Not just protected by security teams and surveillance, but safe because the people who'd taken her once could never do so again. Even Sokolov was dead. Viktor Kozlov was dead. Alexei Petrov was dead. The threat that had hung over Chloe for 7 years was finally, permanently eliminated. As we drove through the city toward the federal detention center, I found myself humming a familiar melody. Isabella's lullaby, the song that had led me back to my daughter. And I wondered if somehow, somewhere, my wife knew that our little girl was going to be okay, that we'd all be okay. Eventually. The federal detention center was exactly as cold and unwelcoming as I'd expected. I'd been inside plenty of these facilities before, visiting associates who'd been less careful than me about avoiding law enforcement attention. But experiencing it from the other side, wearing an orange jumpsuit, sleeping on a thin mattress, eating food that barely qualified as edible, was a different experience entirely. My lawyers descended within hours, a small army of expensive suits arguing for bail and reasonable bond. But the federal prosecutor was having none of it. Connor Blackwood, known organized crime figure, had conducted an armed assault resulting in a death. Flight risk, danger to the community, need to send a message about vigilante justice. They threw every argument at the judge during my arraignment. I sat through it all in silence, my mind elsewhere. With Emma. With Claire. Wondering if they were okay, if Emma had spoken yet, if she'd be able to recover from this latest trauma. The FBI had questioned me extensively about my relationship with the girl I'd rescued, and I'd told them the truth. She was my daughter, kidnapped 7 years ago, found and raised by Claire Martinez, and recently discovered alive. I'd provided DNA evidence, custody agreements, everything that proved Emma was Chloe Blackwood, and that I had every legal and moral right to rescue her from her kidnapper. It didn't matter. I'd killed a man. Intent, circumstances, justification. Those would all be sorted out during a trial that would probably happen months from now. In the meantime, I would sit in a cell and wait. On the 3rd day, my lawyer arrived with unexpected news. "Claire Martinez wants to see you. She's been approved for a visitor's pass. I wasn't sure what to expect when they led me to the visiting room. Would she be angry that my world had once again dragged Emma into danger? Grateful that I'd saved her? Some combination of both? But when Claire walked in, her eyes red from crying, but her posture determinedly strong. The first words out of her mouth were, "Thank you. Thank you for bringing her back to me." I sat down across from her, the plexiglass barrier between us a stark reminder of the divide between our worlds. "How is she?" "Traumatized, obviously, but physically unharmed. The therapist says she'll need intensive treatment to work through this, but—" Claire's voice broke. "But she's alive, Connor. Because of you. If you hadn't found her, if you hadn't been willing to risk everything to bring her home, I would have lost her. We both would have lost her. I did what any father would do. No." Claire shook her head firmly. "You did what only you could do. The FBI was still coordinating their response when you already had her. Your resources, your people, your willingness to operate outside the law, that's what saved her. And I know I should probably condemn that. I should be the responsible citizen who says there are proper channels and legal procedures. But I'm a mother before I'm anything else. And as Emma's mother, all I care about is that she's safe." We sat in silence for a moment, processing everything that had happened. Then Claire leaned forward, her expression intense. "She asked about you," she said quietly. "She can't speak yet, but she wrote it down. Who was the man? That's what she wanted to know. Who was the man who saved me?" My heart clenched. "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth. Not all of it, not yet. But I told her that a long time ago, before I found her, she had a father who loved her very much. And that father had been looking for her for years, hoping she was alive. I told her that man was you, that you're her biological father." How did she react? She cried. Then she wrote another question. "Does he want me back?" "Connor, what do I tell her? Do you want her to come live with you? Because legally, with you in prison, I'm her sole guardian now. But when you get out, if you get out, do you want to change our arrangement?" It was the question I'd been asking myself for months, ever since I'd discovered Emma was alive. What did I really want? The honest answer was that I wanted my daughter back, wanted to be her father in every sense of the word, wanted to tuck her in at night and help her with homework and watch her grow up the way I should have been able to do all along. But I also knew what that would cost her. My world was violence and danger. Even with Ivan Sokolov dead, there would always be enemies, always be threats, always be the possibility that loving me would put her in harm's way. "Tell her," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, "that what I want doesn't matter as much as what's best for her. Tell her that she has a mother who loves her, you, Claire, and she has a father who loves her too, even if he can't be there the way normal fathers are. Tell her that she gets to decide what our relationship looks like when she's ready. And until then, I'm just going to make sure she's safe and protected, and has everything she needs to heal." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "You really mean that? You're not going to fight me for custody?" "I'm not going to fight you at all. You saved my daughter's life. You gave her love and stability when her world fell apart. You're her mother in every way that matters. I'm just grateful I got to be part of making sure she stays safe." "She wants to visit you," Claire said. She wrote it down. "Can I see him again?" I told her I'd ask. "I don't know if the prison will allow it, given your case, but if they do. Would you want that? Would I want to see my daughter again?" It was like asking if I wanted to keep breathing. Yes. God, yes. But only if she's ready. Only if it won't traumatize her further. I don't want her to see me like this. I gestured at my jumpsuit, the bleak visiting room, the guard standing watch nearby. If it's going to hurt her. I think she needs to see you. Needs to understand that you're real. That you're not just a ghost from a past she can't remember. And maybe. Claire hesitated. Maybe it would help you too. To spend time with her. To start building whatever relationship you're going to have. We talked for another hour, working out the details, discussing Emma's therapy and her education, and the practicalities of our strange blended family situation. By the time Claire left, I felt something that had been absent since my arrest. Hope. 2 weeks later, they allowed the visit. Claire and Emma arrived on a Saturday morning, and I watched through the security glass as they checked in at the front desk. Emma was holding Claire's hand tightly, her small frame almost hidden behind her mother's body, clearly nervous about seeing me again. The guard led them to the visiting room and positioned Emma and Claire across from me at the small table. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Emma stared at me with those green eyes, my eyes, full of uncertainty and curiosity, and what might have been recognition. "Hi, Emma," I said softly. "Thank you for coming to see me." She didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. Claire gave her an encouraging nod, and Emma slowly pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. She unfolded it and slid it across the table to me. In careful, childish handwriting, she'd written, "Are you really my dad?" I looked at Claire, who nodded permission for me to answer honestly. I looked back at Emma, this brave little girl who'd survived so much, and tried to find the right words. "Yes," I said. "I'm really your dad, your biological father. When you were very small, before you can remember, your mother Isabella and I loved you more than anything in the world. Then some bad people took you away from us, and I spent 7 years looking for you. I thought you were gone forever. But then I found out you were alive, that Claire had saved you and taken care of you, and I decided that what mattered most wasn't whether you remembered me, but that you were safe and happy and loved." Emma listened intently, her expression serious beyond her years. Then she picked up the pencil Claire had brought and wrote another message. "Mama Claire says you saved me from the bad man. I did, and I'd do it again. I'd do anything to keep you safe, Emma. That's what fathers do for their daughters." She considered this, then wrote, "The bad man said I used to be called Chloe. Is that true?" My throat tightened. "Yes. When you were born, your mother Isabella and I named you Chloe. Chloe Blackwood. But when Claire found you and saved you, she gave you a new name. Emma. And that's okay. You can be Emma, or you can be Chloe, or you can be both. What matters is that you get to choose." Emma nodded slowly. Then, surprisingly, she stood up and walked around the table toward me. The guard tensed, but I held up a hand to show I wasn't a threat. Emma stopped directly in front of me, studying my face with an intensity that made my heart ache. Then she did something that shattered me completely. She hugged me. It was tentative at first, her small arms barely reaching around my shoulders, but then she held on tighter, and I wrapped my arms around my daughter for the first time in 7 years, and I felt something break loose in my chest, all the rage, all the grief, all the violence I'd carried for so long. It didn't disappear, but it shifted, making room for something else. Something softer. Something that felt almost like redemption. When Emma finally pulled back, she had tears on her cheeks. She returned to her seat and wrote one more message, this one longer than the others. "Mama Claire says you have to stay here because you hurt the bad man to save me. Is that true? Are you going to be in trouble?" "I am in trouble," I admitted. "What I did, even though I did it to save you, was against the law. So I have to stay here while very smart people figure out what should happen to me. But Emma, I want you to know something. I'm not sorry. I would make the same choice again. Saving you was worth any price." Claire spoke up for the first time since we'd started talking. "Emma, sweetie, why don't you show Connor what you've been working on with Dr. Sarah?" Emma nodded and pulled out a folder from her backpack. Inside were drawings, dozens of them, all butterflies in various colors and patterns. She spread them across the table, and I realized they were telling a story. The first drawings showed dark, menacing butterflies with sharp edges. But as I looked through them in order, the butterflies gradually became brighter, softer, more beautiful. "These are amazing," I said honestly. "You're really talented, Emma." She wrote, "Dr. Sarah says I'm drawing my feelings. The dark butterflies were when I was scared. The pretty ones are when I feel safe." "Are you feeling safe now?" I asked gently. She nodded, then hesitated and wrote, "Most of the time. But sometimes I still have nightmares about the warehouse, about the bad man." "That's okay. That's normal. It's going to take time to feel completely safe again. But Emma, I promise you, that bad man is never coming back. No one is ever going to hurt you like that again." We spent another hour together, Emma showing me more of her drawings and slowly becoming more comfortable in my presence. She couldn't speak yet, but through her written notes and her art, I began to understand the remarkable person she'd become, despite everything she'd been through. As the visit was ending and Claire was packing up Emma's things, my daughter wrote one final note and pressed it into my hand. Then she hugged me again, quickly, and hurried back to Claire's side. After they left, I unfolded the note. In her careful handwriting, Emma had written, "Thank you for finding me, Dad." Dad. She'd called me Dad. I sat in that visiting room for another 10 minutes after they'd gone, just holding that piece of paper and crying, like I hadn't cried since Isabella died. Tears of grief for the 7 years we'd lost. Tears of relief that she was alive. Tears of gratitude that Claire had saved her. And tears of hope that maybe, somehow, we could find a way forward as a family. My trial was 6 months later. The prosecution argued that regardless of my motivations, I'd conducted a vigilante operation that resulted in a death. My defense team countered with evidence of Emma's kidnapping, Ivan Sokolov's criminal history, and the immediate threat he'd posed to my daughter's life. They presented expert witnesses who testified about the trauma of parental loss and the psychological impact of prolonged separation from a kidnapped child. But the most powerful testimony came from Claire and Emma themselves. Claire described finding Emma in that warehouse 7 years ago, the injuries she'd sustained, the nightmares that had plagued her for years. She talked about the second kidnapping, her helplessness as she watched Emma being taken from the school, her certainty that she'd lost her daughter forever, and she testified that without my intervention, Emma would have died in that warehouse for the second time. Then Emma took the stand. The entire courtroom held its breath as this small, silent girl sat in the witness box. The judge had been briefed about her selective mutism and had agreed to let her provide written testimony. Through carefully written responses to the prosecutor's questions, Emma described her experiences. She couldn't remember the original kidnapping 7 years ago. Those memories were gone, locked away behind trauma and time. But she remembered the second one, remembered being grabbed from her school, remembered the gun against her head, remembered Ivan Sokolov telling her that he was going to finish what Viktor Kozlov had started. And she remembered me, remembered the man who'd burst into the warehouse with his team, remembered feeling, for the first time in that terrifying ordeal, that she might survive. When asked if she was afraid of me, Emma wrote, "No, he's my dad. He protected me." The jury deliberated for 3 days. I was prepared for the worst. Several years in federal prison, loss of my business empire, permanent separation from Emma. But when they returned, the verdict surprised everyone. Not guilty. The foreman explained their reasoning. While my actions had technically violated several laws, they constituted a reasonable response to an immediate threat against my child's life. The fact that I'd tried to resolve the situation peacefully, that Ivan had been pointing a gun at Emma when I fired, and that no innocent bystanders had been harmed all factored into their decision. I walked out of that courthouse a free man. something I hadn't dared hope for during the long months of detention and trial. Claire and Emma were waiting outside with Marcus and my legal team. When Emma saw me, she broke away from Claire and ran toward me, throwing herself into my arms with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of a child who's no longer afraid. I picked her up and held her close, this precious girl who'd survived more than any child should have to endure. And I made a silent promise to Isabella, wherever she was watching from, that I would never let our daughter down again. The next months were a period of adjustment for all of us. I formally abandoned my criminal empire, liquidating my illegal operations and focusing exclusively on my legitimate businesses. It wasn't easy. Walking away from the power and control I'd spent decades building required letting go of the man I'd become after losing Chloe. But every time I saw Emma smile, every time she wrote me a note or showed me a new drawing, I remembered why it was worth it. Claire and I established a custody arrangement that worked for everyone. Emma lived primarily with Claire during the school year, and I bought a house 3 blocks away so I could see her daily. We had dinner together several times a week, and I was there for school events and therapy appointments and all the mundane, wonderful aspects of parenthood I'd missed for 7 years. I wasn't trying to replace Claire as Emma's mother. That would have been impossible and wrong. Instead, we became a team, co-parents united by our love for the same child. It was unconventional, but it worked. Emma's therapy continued, and slowly, gradually, she began to heal. The nightmares became less frequent. Her smile came more easily. And 9 months after I'd saved her from that warehouse, something miraculous happened. It was a Saturday evening in early March, almost exactly 1 year since I'd first heard Claire singing Isabella's lullaby. We'd just finished dinner at my house. Emma, Claire, Marcus, who'd become like an uncle to Emma, and me. It was snowing outside, big fat flakes that transformed the neighborhood into something magical. Emma was at the window, watching the snow fall, when she turned to look at me. And for the first time in 7 years, the first time since she was 3 years old, my daughter spoke. "Dad," she said, her voice small but clear. "Look at the snow." The room went completely silent. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus froze with his coffee cup halfway to his lips. And I felt my heart stop and restart as I processed what I'd just heard. "Emma?" I managed to say. You spoke." She turned fully toward me, and there were tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. "I found my voice," she said. "Dr. Sarah said I would, when I felt safe enough. And I do, Dad. I feel safe now." I crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to my knees in front of her, pulling her into the tightest hug I'd ever given. She wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered against my shoulder, "I remember you. Not everything. But I remember you singing to me. Mama Isabella's song. I remember being safe." Behind us, I could hear Claire crying. Happy tears, I realized. Tears of relief and joy that Emma was finally, truly healing. Marcus discreetly left the room, giving us privacy for this moment we'd all been waiting for. "I love you," I told Emma, told Chloe, told my daughter by whatever name she chose. "I have always loved you, from the moment you were born, and I will always keep you safe. That's a promise." "I love you too, Dad," she said. And then, as if she'd been saving up 7 years' worth of words, she started talking. She told me about her favorite books and her best friend at school, and how she wanted to learn to paint, not just draw. She told me that she had nightmares sometimes, but they weren't as scary anymore. She told me that she loved Claire, but she was glad she had me too, that having 2 parents who both loved her made her feel complete. We talked until the snow outside had buried the streets in white, until Claire finally insisted it was past Emma's bedtime. As she was leaving, my daughter hugged me goodnight and whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me." "Never," I promised. "Not in 7 years, not in 700. You're my daughter, Chloe Emma Blackwood. and I will always find you. That night, I stood at my window watching Claire and Emma walk back to their house through the snow, their footprints leaving a trail in the white. They were holding hands, talking and laughing, the picture of a normal mother and daughter. And I realized that somehow, impossibly, we'd made it through. We'd survived kidnapping and trauma, and years of separation. We'd navigated the complicated terrain of biology versus nurture, of legal parents versus biological ones, of a criminal past versus a hopeful future. Emma had her voice back. I had my daughter back. And Claire had the family she'd always deserved. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined 7 years ago, when I'd first lost Chloe. It wasn't neat or simple or conventional, but it was ours, built from broken pieces and second chances and the stubborn refusal to give up hope. My daughter was alive. She was healing. She was loved. And finally, after 7 years of darkness, I could see light. The snow continued to fall through the night, covering the city in pristine white, a blank page ready for new stories to be written. And as I eventually drifted off to sleep, I heard it, soft and distant, but unmistakable. Isabella's lullaby, hummed by my daughter in her own house 3 blocks away. She remembered, and in remembering, she'd found her way back to me. We'd found our way back to each other, and that was enough.